The late summer sun stretched long golden rays across my land, painting the rolling fields in warm amber light. 40 acres of hard-earned freedom lay before me, fenced in and guarded not by walls or regulations, but by the rugged silence of Montana. Out here, peace wasn't just a luxury, it was a birthright. I leaned against the porch railing, coffee in hand, and watched the horses graze near the tree line. My dogs lounged lazily at my feet, their ears twitching with every sound carried on the breeze. No neighbors, no traffic, no one telling me what I could or couldn't build on my own soil. Just the quiet kind of life I dreamed about after hanging up my Navy SEAL uniform. I hadn't left discipline behind, though. The habits of service ran too deep. My tools were always sharp, my gear always ready, and my land kept in order. But unlike the strict regimens of the teams, this land gave me the freedom to shape my days as I pleased. I was still serving, just in a different way now. A reserve deputy's badge rested in my safe, and with it came responsibility: keep the peace when called, uphold the law when needed. It wasn't about authority. It was about honor. Most folks around here respected that. In small towns, you learn quick that reputations were stronger than fences. But there was always one exception. Mine came in the form of a neighbor who had rolled into Montana from the city, dragging with her the worst parts of suburban life, rules, gossip, and the unshakable belief that she was queen of the block. Her name was Karen. And Karen had a problem with me. I first noticed it when I caught her idling by my gate one evening, her phone camera aimed at my property. She snapped pictures of the barn I'd built, the solar panels on my roof, even my mailbox. At first, I brushed it off. Maybe she was just curious. But soon, she marched right up my driveway, clipboard in hand, and started rattling off something about HOA guidelines and community standards. I almost laughed. "Ma'am," I said, steady and polite, "this land isn't part of any HOA. Never has been, never will be." She didn't like that answer. Her lips tightened, and her eyes narrowed into that condescending glare only certain people can pull off. Every neighborhood has to follow rules. You can't just do whatever you want out here. On the contrary, I replied, that's exactly what this land is for. Freedom. Independence. She stormed off that day, muttering about calling the board and reporting violations. I didn't think much of it at the time. Folks like her either burned themselves out or moved on. But Karen wasn't built like that. She was the kind of person who thrived on conflict, who needed control the way a ranch needs water. And I had just given her a drought. For weeks after, little signs popped up. Notes tucked under my gate latch, written in bold letters: "Fence violates code, remove immediately." Or letters stamped with an official-looking HOA seal demanding I pay fines for unauthorized structures. None of it made sense, because there was no HOA. But that didn't stop her. I tossed the letters into a drawer, more amused than threatened. I'd dealt with worse enemies in war zones overseas, this was just paper. But what I didn't know was how far Karen was willing to go. That evening on the porch, with the sun sinking low, I couldn't shake the nagging feeling that something bigger was coming. The dogs lifted their heads suddenly, ears perked toward the dirt road. Headlights flashed between the trees. For a second, I thought it might be a neighbor stopping by. But when the vehicle slowed, I caught the unmistakable silhouette of Karen's SUV creeping past my property line. I sighed, finishing the last sip of coffee. Trouble was brewing, and I had no idea that the next move she made wouldn't just test my patience, it would test the law itself. The next morning started like any other. I saddled up my horse, Duke, and rode the fence line to check for breaks. The air was cool, crisp with pine, and the world felt steady. That kind of steadiness is rare, you don't take it for granted. But steadiness never lasts long when someone like Karen lives down the road. By mid-morning, I heard tires crunching up my driveway. I turned just in time to see her SUV screech to a halt, dust rolling over the hood like a storm cloud. Out stepped Karen, dressed sharp as if she were going to a board meeting, not visiting a ranch. Clipboard in hand again. I stayed calm, brushing down Duke. "Morning," I said evenly. Her lips pressed tight. Don't morning me. I've already told you, you're violating several community standards. Community standards? I raised an eyebrow. Karen, there isn't even a community board here. You know that. She flipped her clipboard around, showing me a printed sheet full of highlighted sections. According to the homeowner's guidelines. Those guidelines don't apply to me, I cut in, my voice low but firm. This property is private. No HOA jurisdiction. Her face reddened. Everyone in this valley is under the same rules. You can't just build barns, run livestock, and put up those ugly solar panels without approval. It brings down property values. I let out a small chuckle, shaking my head. Karen, the only thing bringing down property values around here is you snooping on your neighbors. That hit a nerve. She stepped forward, jabbing the air with her pen. If you don't comply, I'll make sure you're fined. I have connections. I'll call the sheriff if I have to. That last part made me pause. She said it like a threat, but I knew how that system worked because I was part of it. As a sworn reserve deputy, I understood the weight of calling 911. It wasn't a tool for tantrums. It was for emergencies, real ones. I walked closer, calm but unyielding. Karen, let me make something clear. You have no authority here. None. You can wave that clipboard all you want, but it won't change the deed that has my name on it. If you try to invent rules or fake violations, you'll only be hurting yourself. Her eyes widened, as if she wasn't used to being challenged. Then she scoffed and spun on her heel, marching back to her SUV. Before slamming the door, she shouted, "We'll see about that." I watched the dust trail vanish down the road. I didn't take her seriously, not yet. But deep down, I knew her kind. The more you told them no, the louder they screamed yes. That night, I found another letter in my mailbox. This one was thicker, stuffed with fake citations. Words like noncompliance, property lien, and mandatory hearing were bolded in red ink. She had even stamped it with something resembling an official seal. It would have been funny if it wasn't so desperate. She wanted me scared. Intimidated. Broken down enough to fold. Instead, I tossed the letter into the same drawer as the others. But I took one extra step this time. I snapped photos of everything. If she wanted to play games, I'd build my own record. Over the next week, the harassment escalated. Notes taped to my gate. Anonymous calls late at night telling me to leave while I still could. A couple of times, I even spotted Karen parked across the road, glaring through binoculars like she was some kind of sheriff on a stakeout. But the turning point came one gray morning. I was fixing a section of fence when my phone buzzed. It was the county dispatcher, someone I knew well. Her tone was cautious. "Hey, we just got a call about your property. Woman says there's an illegal squatter refusing to leave." I froze, jaw tightening. Squatter? On my own land? Who made the call? I asked, though I already knew the answer. A sigh. Neighbor named Karen. And just like that, the steady piece of ranch life was gone. Karen hadn't just complained anymore. She'd pulled the pin and thrown the grenade. The sound of the dispatcher's words still rang in my head as I hung up the phone. Illegal squatter. Karen had actually told 911 that I didn't own my own ranch. I stood there by the fence, hammer still in my hand, staring at the horizon. A hot rush of anger threatened to rise, but I forced it back down. Discipline first, always. That's what years in the Navy had drilled into me, never let emotion steer the mission. I whistled for Duke and headed back to the barn. If deputies were coming, I wanted my paperwork ready. My land deed, identification, and reserve badge all went into a neat folder on the kitchen table. When people throw false accusations, truth is your sharpest weapon. It didn't take long. 15 minutes later, the hum of engines carried over the hills. I stepped onto the porch as two sheriff cruisers pulled up my drive, red and blue lights cutting through the quiet morning. Behind them, like a moth to a flame, Karen's SUV screeched to a stop. She climbed out, arms flailing, yelling before the deputies even killed their sirens. "That's him," she shrieked, pointing at me like I was a wanted fugitive. "He's squatting here. This isn't his land. He needs to be removed immediately." The two deputies exchanged looks. Both were men I'd worked alongside before, though their faces showed careful neutrality. They had to treat every call as serious, even when the caller wasn't. "Morning," I said evenly, stepping down from the porch. "Care to explain what this is about?" Karen stormed forward, practically shoving the deputies aside. "Don't play dumb. This land belongs to the association. You don't have approval to live here. He's trespassing, arrest him." One deputy raised a hand, steadying her. "Ma'am, step back. We'll handle this." I could see the tension in their shoulders. A false claim like this wasn't just a nuisance, it wasted resources, tied up emergency lines, and risked real danger if things escalated. I opened the folder slowly and handed over the deed and ID. "Property's mine. Bought and paid for. Here's the paperwork to prove it." The second deputy flipped through the documents, nodding slightly as he read. The first deputy turned back toward Karen. "Ma'am, it looks like his ownership checks out." Karen's face twisted in outrage. "No, no, no. You don't understand. He forged those papers. He's tricking you." The deputy sighed. "Do you have any evidence to support your claim?" She froze, stammering, "Well, the HOA rules clearly." "There is no HOA here," I interrupted, my voice sharp but calm. "This isn't some gated subdivision. This is private land, county-recorded, outside any association. And I'll thank you not to waste the sheriff's time with lies." Karen spun toward me, her finger jabbing the air. "You think you're above the law. But I'll get you out. I'll keep calling until you're gone." I caught the deputy's eyes, lowering my voice so only they heard. "You both know I've served with integrity, both overseas and here. But this is harassment. She's making false police reports." They nodded subtly. They knew. But they had to play it by the book. Karen wasn't done. She stomped back to her SUV, rifled through the passenger seat, and returned with one of her forged HOA violation notices. She shoved it at the deputies as if it were gospel. "Here! This proves he's breaking the rules." The deputies glanced at the paper, then at each other. The thing looked official enough at first glance, but the formatting was sloppy. And the so-called seal was just a design printed from a home computer. "Ma'am," one deputy said carefully, "this doesn't appear to be a legally binding document." Her voice rose to a shriek. "You're all in on this. Protecting him because he's one of you. I won't stand for it." That's when I saw it, the dangerous shift. Karen wasn't just being annoying anymore. She was unstable, desperate, and pushing toward obstruction. I folded my arms across my chest, steadying myself. "Deputies, I've been patient. But if she keeps filing false reports and impersonating authority, it's going to cross into criminal territory." One deputy gave me a measured look. "Understood. We'll file this incident." But if she continues, he trailed off, knowing I understood the implication. Karen stomped back to her SUV, slamming the door hard enough to rattle the mirrors. She sped off in a spray of gravel, screaming something I couldn't hear. The deputies lingered a moment, apologetic. "Sorry about this. We'll write it up. Keep records of everything. She's making herself a bigger problem than she realizes." I nodded. "Don't worry. I've been documenting from the start." As they drove away, I stood in the settling dust, fists clenched at my sides. Karen thought she'd won by summoning the law against me. What she didn't realize was that I was the law, and the next time she crossed the line, I'd be the one placing cuffs on her. Karen's next move came faster than I expected. By mid-afternoon, she was back, her silver BMW creeping slowly along the edge of my driveway like a predator stalking prey. I was in the barn, repairing a fence post when I saw her through the window, binoculars pressed to her eyes, her expression a mix of fury and desperation. I wiped my hands on a rag and stepped outside. The scent of diesel from the tractor mixed oddly with her overpowering floral perfume, and I couldn't help but smirk. This was turning into a full-blown standoff. "Mr. Blackwood," she shouted from her car window, slamming the glass down. "You think you can ignore me? I have authority. I am the HOA. You will comply, or I'll—" Her threat faltered as she realized there wasn't a single person nearby who would support her claims. I crossed my arms, calm, confident, letting her rage simmer. I had learned early in my career that bullies often overextend when they sense weakness. The key was patience. Let them act. Document. Collect evidence. That way, the law and common sense could do the talking. I approached the BMW slowly, hands visible. "Karen, I suggest you park that car and step away from my property. You're trespassing, and I have a detailed record of your harassment over the last few months." She laughed, but it was high-pitched and brittle. "Harassment? I'm protecting this community from criminal activity. You're violating HOA covenants. I've got the law on my side." I shook my head. "Actually, ma'am, the law is on my side. You've repeatedly misrepresented authority, filed false police reports, and attempted to intimidate residents. Every step you take right now is creating a stronger case against you." For a moment, I saw the faint flicker of doubt in her eyes. But she quickly masked it with outrage. "You think I'm afraid of you? You can't stop me." I didn't respond. Instead, I called over my shoulder. "Duke, come on." The old sheepdog bounded into view, tail wagging, completely unbothered by Karen's theatrics. It was a reminder that life on the ranch had its own rhythm, calm, steady, grounded. Karen, meanwhile, was escalating. She tried to block the driveway with her car, refusing to let any customers through. My farm stand was still open, and a handful of loyal neighbors had arrived, watching the unfolding scene like spectators at a duel. I didn't raise my voice. I didn't curse. I simply reached into my pocket and pulled out my badge wallet, flipping it open slowly so the sunlight caught the brass. "Karen Peton," I said evenly, "this is Deputy Sheriff Ezra Blackwood. You are currently committing multiple violations, trespassing, obstruction, and harassment. You are ordered to vacate the property immediately." Her mouth fell open, but she didn't move. She seemed frozen, perhaps realizing for the first time that her attempts to intimidate had just handed me the upper hand. I took a careful step closer. "One more warning. Step out of the vehicle." A bead of sweat ran down her temple. The neighbors, sensing the tension, moved closer, recording on their phones. Karen's bravado faltered. She glanced at the gathering witnesses, then back at me. Every second she hesitated, the stronger my position became. Finally, she stepped out of the car, arms raised, like a general surrendering after a futile siege. You can't." I didn't finish her sentence. I stepped forward, clipped the cuffs on her wrists, and read her rights. She struggled, sputtered, and flailed, but I held firm. The badge in my hand wasn't just a symbol, it was proof that authority without accountability is nothing, and authority backed by truth and documentation is unstoppable. The neighbors exhaled collectively. Some cheered softly. Others snapped photos, documenting the arrest of the woman who had terrorized them for months. Karen's face was a portrait of disbelief, rage, and fear all rolled into one. By the time the deputies arrived to assist with transport, the situation was already under control. Karen's story of victimhood crumbled in real time, replaced by a pile of documented harassment incidents and fraudulent activity. As she was loaded into the cruiser, I felt a strange sense of satisfaction, not revenge, but justice. This wasn't about me winning, it was about restoring order, protecting property rights, and sending a message that fake authority and intimidation would not prevail. I stood there, watching the cruiser pull away, the Montana sky turning gold with evening sunlight. Duke nudged my leg, reminding me it was just another day on the farm. Karen's threats were gone, replaced by a tangible sense of peace, at least for now. And for the first time in months, I could finally enjoy my property without someone trying to turn it into a battlefield. The morning after Karen's arrest, Willowbrook Estates was buzzing with a mixture of relief, disbelief, and cautious celebration. Word had spread fast. Social media, local news outlets, and word of mouth ensured that every resident knew exactly what had transpired. For months, Karen had controlled the narrative, spreading fear and false claims about my farm and me. Now, the tables had turned completely. I opened the farm stand early, as usual, expecting a trickle of loyal customers. What I found instead was a line stretching down the driveway. Families, neighbors, even people from nearby towns had come to support the farm and witness firsthand the place Karen had tried to destroy. There was a sense of collective vindication in the air, and it was intoxicating. Mrs. Patterson, the retired schoolteacher who had become a quiet but powerful ally during the harassment campaign, was the first to approach me. "Ezra, they don't understand just how close we all were to losing this," she said, shaking her head. "You didn't just protect your farm, you protected our rights." I smiled, but inside I knew it wasn't just me. The victory had been a team effort. My fellow deputies, the veterans who had volunteered to ensure safe access to the farm, the neighbors who had refused to pay dues to the fake HOA, and Sarah at the DA's office, all had played crucial roles. And then there was the evidence, painstakingly documented for months, which had made the arrest airtight. Channel 7's investigative team arrived shortly after opening, wanting to capture reactions for a live segment. The reporter, Janet Walsh, interviewed residents about the months of harassment, highlighting Karen's escalating false reports, sabotage attempts, and fraudulent collection of HOA dues. It was surreal hearing neighbors describe the tactics Karen had used, the surveillance, the threats, and even the bribery attempts. The best part was seeing the collective relief. Residents admitted that before my intervention, they had felt powerless. Now, they were empowered, and the sense of community began to repair itself in real time. Children ran freely near Buttercup and the chicken coop, families lingered at the farm stand, and laughter replaced the tension that had haunted Willowbrook for months. Meanwhile, legal proceedings against Karen began in earnest. Federal prosecutors filed charges for wire fraud, mail fraud, embezzlement, and filing false reports, multiple felonies supported by the evidence I had gathered. The case made national headlines as an example of how one determined citizen could expose organized fraud and protect their community from exploitation. The aftermath wasn't just legal, it was transformative for Willowbrook Estates. With Karen removed, residents organized to create a legitimate HOA, properly incorporated and transparent. They held elections, established oversight committees, and passed bylaws that specifically protected agricultural operations. The community had learned that accountability and documentation were more powerful than fear and intimidation. For me personally, life returned to a peaceful rhythm. The farm became a hub for education, social gatherings, and sustainable agriculture initiatives. Visitors came to learn about growing food, raising animals, and preserving rural traditions. The farm stand expanded, including products from neighboring farms, and the Blackwood Harvest Festival became a regional event, drawing thousands to celebrate local farming and community spirit. Even more gratifying was seeing how justice had a ripple effect. Karen's fraudulent actions had attempted to undermine community trust and personal livelihoods, but her exposure strengthened both. People became more aware of their rights, neighbors supported each other, and the values of honesty, hard work, and transparency became the foundation of the rebuilt community. By the end of the month, Karen's name had become synonymous with fraud and entitlement in Willowbrook. She was sentenced to federal prison, ordered to pay restitution, and required to perform community service, ironically helping with local agricultural projects. Her downfall was complete, public, and deserved, while the community she tried to dominate flourished. Sitting on my porch that evening, watching the sun dip behind the mountains, I realized the full impact of the ordeal. It had begun as a personal fight for my family farm, but it had grown into a triumph for the entire community. The smell of fresh hay, diesel, and ripening vegetables carried the promise of resilience. Willowbrook had survived Karen's reign of terror, and in doing so, had become stronger, united, and ready to protect itself from any future bullies. Justice had not just been served, it had been built, documented, and shared. And for the first time in months, I felt a deep, satisfying peace. The weeks following Karen's arrest were a whirlwind of legal proceedings, media attention, and community celebration. Federal prosecutors moved quickly, charging her with multiple felonies, wire fraud, mail fraud, embezzlement, filing false police reports, and witness intimidation. Each charge was supported by the meticulously documented evidence I had collected, recordings, photographs, financial statements, and testimonies from neighbors who had endured her harassment firsthand. In court, Karen's confidence evaporated as her own files became her undoing. Her attempts to frame me as a corrupt deputy sheriff were easily dismantled, and her fraudulent HOA operations were exposed to a stunned courtroom. The judge, reviewing years of falsified records and personal bank statements, remarked on the audacity and scale of her crimes. It wasn't just a local HOA gone rogue, it was an organized, systematic abuse of authority for personal gain. Meanwhile, Willowbrook residents began recovering the funds Karen had stolen. Each household who had paid dues over the past 5 years received restitution checks, averaging around $8,000 per family. It wasn't just the money, it was validation. For years, Karen had instilled fear, making neighbors question their rights and their ability to defend themselves. Now, justice had returned their power, their confidence, and their hard-earned money. The community didn't just recover financially, it began to heal socially. Residents organized a new, legitimate HOA with proper incorporation, transparent accounting, and bylaws specifically protecting rural and agricultural properties. Where Karen had fostered division and mistrust, the new HOA fostered collaboration, dialogue, and mutual respect. The lawns stayed manicured, but the barns, chicken coops, and vegetable gardens were safe, legal, protected, and celebrated as part of the neighborhood's character. On a personal level, the farm flourished. With the constant threat of harassment removed, I could focus on expanding the farm stand and sustainable agriculture initiatives. Local families, inspired by the story of standing up to fraud, came to learn about organic farming, animal care, and self-sufficiency. The Blackwood Harvest Festival became a regional highlight, attracting visitors from across Montana and neighboring states. It wasn't just a celebration of farming, it was a celebration of resilience, justice, and community solidarity. Even more fulfilling was the sense of personal peace. The months of harassment had tested every limit, but they had also proven something crucial: courage, persistence, and evidence-based strategy can overcome entitlement and corruption. I had survived, and Willowbrook had survived. And then there was Sarah. Over countless cups of coffee, strategy sessions, and long evenings reviewing evidence, a bond had formed that went beyond friendship. Her intelligence, dedication, and unwavering support had been invaluable, and now she was an integral part of the farm and my life. Together, we expanded the farm's educational programs, helping the next generation understand agriculture, law, and the importance of standing up for what's right. As for Karen, her sentencing brought poetic justice. 3 years in federal prison, $400,000 in restitution, and community service focused on agriculture ensured she would directly confront the consequences of the life she tried to steal from others. Every time she thought she could manipulate or intimidate, the law, and an informed community, proved stronger. By the time the sun set over the Montana mountains, casting long golden shadows across the fields, I stood on the porch with Buttercup grazing nearby, the smell of ripening tomatoes filling the air. The farm was thriving, the community was thriving, and I had never felt more connected to both. The story of Karen Peton became more than a local cautionary tale, it became a symbol of how ordinary people, armed with knowledge, patience, and documentation, can protect their rights, their property, and their community. Willowbrook Estates had been tested and had emerged stronger, united, and ready to defend itself from any future bullies. Sometimes justice isn't loud. Sometimes it isn't immediate. But when it is thorough, principled, and patient, it doesn't just punish the guilty, it transforms communities, restores trust, and creates a lasting legacy. Standing there, watching the golden sunlight reflect off the barn roof and the leaves of the apple trees, I realized something profound. Karen's harassment had inadvertently given me exactly the life I wanted: peace, purpose, and a thriving community that would endure long after any one person tried to destroy it. The weeks after Karen's sentencing were quieter, but not without significance. The media attention gradually shifted, and Willowbrook Estates finally settled into a rhythm of genuine community life. Residents no longer feared arbitrary fines, invasive surveillance, or false accusations. Instead, they shared stories, celebrated harvests, and participated in events that brought the neighborhood together. The garden plots and barns that Karen once targeted were now symbols of resilience, a testament to the fact that integrity and hard work can withstand even the most relentless harassment. I spent my mornings like I had before, sipping coffee on the porch and watching the Montana sunrise illuminate the mountains. But now, there was a profound sense of peace. Buttercup and the other livestock roamed freely without fear of interference, and the farm stand thrived as more and more families from surrounding counties discovered our produce. What had started as a small, local operation had blossomed into a hub for sustainable farming, education, and community gatherings. The new HOA, fully legitimate and transparent, had instituted bylaws specifically designed to protect agricultural activities and rural property owners. Meetings focused on shared goals, community beautification, mutual assistance, and cultural events, rather than petty conflicts. Residents became actively engaged, ensuring that no individual could monopolize power again. Willowbrook had become a model of how a neighborhood could balance order and freedom, suburban aesthetics and rural heritage. On a personal level, life had grown richer in unexpected ways. Sarah, who had helped me navigate both legal and investigative challenges, became my partner not only in love but also in stewardship of the farm. Together, we introduced new programs for children and families, teaching sustainable farming practices, animal care, and environmental awareness. The farm stand evolved into a cooperative, showcasing products from neighboring farms and giving local agricultural businesses a platform to flourish. The Blackwood Harvest Festival, once a modest event, had grown into a celebrated annual tradition. Thousands of visitors came to learn, eat, and celebrate rural life. The festival raised funds for scholarships supporting students pursuing agriculture and environmental science, ensuring that the fight against bureaucratic overreach would inspire future generations. Karen's harassment, in a strange twist of fate, had inadvertently sparked a movement that promoted education, sustainability, and community engagement. Karen's absence was a relief, but her legacy lingered as a cautionary tale. Residents would occasionally recount her absurd demands and the relentless surveillance that had once terrorized them, now with laughter instead of fear. Her story became a teaching moment, proof that audacity and entitlement cannot replace legality and ethics. Meanwhile, her husband Braden, who had initially backed her schemes, began rebuilding his construction business with a focus on transparency and ethical development. By publicly acknowledging mistakes and supporting local communities, he gradually regained trust, proving that redemption is possible even after complicity in wrongdoing. Legally, the case set a precedent. The Montana legislature passed the Rural Property Protection Act, requiring proper HOA incorporation, transparency in finances, and explicit agricultural exemptions. Neighboring states adopted similar measures, ensuring that no other farmer would face Karen-like harassment without legal recourse. Our victory had not only protected Willowbrook Estates but had sparked a regional movement to defend rural property rights against fraudulent and overreaching authority. Even with all the attention, the most profound victories were subtle: the laughter of children feeding chickens, neighbors sharing produce and recipes, and the simple satisfaction of knowing that standing up for what was right had made a lasting difference. The farm had become more than a home; it was a community center, a school, and a symbol of resilience. Sitting on the porch one evening, watching the sun dip behind the mountains and feeling the cool Montana breeze, I reflected on the journey. Karen's attempt to destroy my life had failed spectacularly. Her fraudulent empire had collapsed, justice had been served, and Willowbrook had been transformed into a thriving, united community. Sometimes, I realized, the best revenge isn't retaliation, it's creating something beautiful and enduring that flourishes despite those who sought to destroy it. Karen's downfall had become the foundation of something far greater, a legacy of integrity, community, and the reminder that ordinary people, armed with knowledge, persistence, and courage, can resist tyranny and protect what they love. The day of Karen Peton's final sentencing arrived, and the atmosphere in Willowbrook Estates was electric, not with fear, but with anticipation. Residents who had endured years of harassment now gathered to witness the legal closure of a nightmare that had dominated their lives. Cameras from local news outlets captured the faces of neighbors, veterans, and families who had stood beside me during the fight, all beaming with quiet triumph. Karen arrived in court, once the picture of arrogance and entitlement, now visibly anxious and subdued. Her expensive lawyer had withdrawn weeks earlier, and she had been forced to represent herself in the final stages of her federal case. Every fraudulent action she had taken, every false report, and every illegal collection of HOA funds had been meticulously documented. There was no wiggle room, no loopholes. Justice had built a case stronger than even her audacious self-confidence. The judge, a no-nonsense jurist with decades of experience, methodically reviewed the evidence, financial records showing $300,000 embezzled into Karen's personal account, false police reports filed across multiple agencies, attempted bribery of public officials, and persistent harassment that escalated into federal crimes. With each exhibit, Karen's expression shifted from defiance to disbelief, and finally to resigned panic. I hereby sentence Karen Peton to 3 years in federal prison, restitution totaling $400,000 to the affected Willowbrook residents, and 500 hours of community service, including work on certified organic farms, the judge declared. The gavel fell, and with it, the symbolic end of her reign of terror. Residents erupted in applause, some even shedding tears of relief. Back at the farm, life began to settle into a rhythm that had previously been unimaginable. The farm stand became a bustling hub every weekend, offering vegetables, goat cheese, honey, and artisanal goods from neighboring farms. Buttercup, my beloved goat, remained the star attraction, adored by children and adults alike. Sarah and I worked side by side, tending the crops, teaching visitors about sustainable agriculture, and hosting small workshops on community resilience and property rights. The Blackwood Harvest Festival had grown into a signature county event, drawing thousands of visitors eager to learn about local farming and the story of standing up against corruption. The festival's first year under our full management raised $25,000 for agricultural scholarships, helping students pursue studies in sustainable farming, environmental science, and community leadership. It was gratifying to see the next generation inspired by lessons drawn from a neighbor's audacity and my fight for justice. The Willowbrook HOA, now fully legal, transparent, and accountable, instituted bylaws that protected rural operations and fostered genuine community engagement. Meetings emphasized collaboration rather than control, ensuring no single individual could wield disproportionate power again. Residents shared ideas for community gardens, block parties, and cooperative projects, rebuilding trust and camaraderie that had been eroded by Karen's manipulations. Even Braden Peton, Karen's husband, emerged from the chaos transformed. He publicly apologized for his complicity, committed to ethical development practices, and worked with the community to repair damaged relationships. His construction business shifted focus toward rural-friendly projects that preserved farmland, demonstrating that accountability and integrity could rebuild reputation and trust. Legally, the case had broader implications. Montana's Rural Property Protection Act, strengthened by the Willowbrook precedent, became a blueprint for neighboring states. HOAs were now required to incorporate legally, maintain transparent finances, and respect agricultural exemptions, safeguarding thousands of rural property owners from arbitrary harassment. Karen's crimes inadvertently set a new legal standard, protecting others before they even realized they needed it. Evenings on the farm returned to a peaceful rhythm. The scent of ripening tomatoes mixed with fresh hay in the cool Montana air. Neighbors gathered to share meals, stories, and laughter, celebrating not only the harvest but the triumph of integrity over deception. Sarah and I often sat on the porch, reflecting on how a battle against petty harassment had transformed an entire community and given rise to a life richer than we could have imagined. The lesson was clear: standing firm against fraud, harassment, and tyranny not only protects what you love but can also inspire and empower an entire community. Karen Peton's downfall became a story told for years, not merely as cautionary entertainment, but as proof that ordinary people, when armed with persistence, knowledge, and courage, can change the course of their lives, and the lives of those around them. Willowbrook Estates, once overshadowed by fear and deception, had emerged stronger, more connected, and more resilient. And in the heart of it all, my farm thrived, not just as a place of work, but as a beacon of justice, community, and hope for generations to come.